and welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren and the Books. I hope you're all very, very well. Today's video, it's a mid-month wrap-up. So normally I wrap my reading up at the end of the month where I talk about all the books that I've read that month. However, I'm filming this on the 10th of January and I've already read 7 books. Quite the range, in fact. One that's got 5 stars, one that's got 1 star, and the one that's got 1 star, I really didn't like it, and I feel like that's probably going to take up a bit of time, so I thought I'll do a mid-month wrap-up, and then I can give that the due attention that it potentially deserves. So let's talk about the 7 books that I've read so far this month. So the first book that I read this year, in fact, was The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill. This is a beautiful, cute as fuck little graphic novel by Kay O'Neill where you follow Greta, who discovers a tea shop, and when she goes to visit that tea shop, there are people living there who look after tea dragons, who grow tea leaves and blossoms and things from their antlers and their horns, and it's just so lovely. It's set into seasons, which is something I really, really like. So the illustrations are done seasonally, and actually it snowed here overnight, so let me show you some snowy ones. So here's the first page of the winter one, where it's got lots of beautiful wintry scenes and fires and warmth and lovely stuff. It's just so pretty. It's just so lovely, and it celebrates friendship and romance, and it's really inclusive and lovely, and the illustrations are not just like, they feel really sort of calm and serene, but also really cheerful and happy. So it's just, it's literally like balm for your January soul. This is the first of 3 books, which I will definitely be reading the rest of them, but I absolutely love this. And what I really loved, I loved the graphic novel story anyway, but at the end, it's got a little like tea dragon handbook and talks about how you should look after tea dragons, and also goes into details about some of the tea dragons and what they like, how big they're, what tea they have, and oh, it's just so cute and adorable, and I really loved it. I gave that 5 stars. Next up was a picture book, and that's Coming to England by Floella Benjamin and illustrated by Diane Ewan. So this is the picture book version of Floella Benjamin's memoir of Coming to England. It tells the story of her coming to England as part of the Windrush generation, and the illustrations in this are absolutely beautiful. They're just so bright and wonderful, and really sort of make the book feel really perfect for children. But what I will say, so I did really enjoy this, and I will definitely go ahead and read the memoir itself, but it ended so abruptly, and I don't know if that's like a child's book because it's a children's picture book, but it's literally like she talks about how, so it goes from her, like, the kids not treating her very nicely, and it says, oh, but after a while we became friends. When we moved to England, it wasn't as nice as I thought it was, but I still dreamt of meeting the Queen. The end. So it ends quite abruptly, but the illustrations are great. I think like this will be a great sort of talking point to get kids talking about this sort of thing. And like I said, the pictures and everything are so beautiful. This is now going to my niece, and I think she will have a lovely, wonderful time with it. Right, now we're on to that bloody 1-star book. So the next book I read, the 3rd book, was A Traveller at the Gates of Wisdom by John Boyne. You might recognise the name John Boyne because previously John Boyne has written 2 books, but I absolutely adored. One of them probably been one of my favourite books of all time, and that is The Heart's Invisible Furies, but he's also written another book called A Ladder to the Sky, which I really enjoyed. So when I saw John Boyne had a new book out, I was like, hurrah, loved his last 2 books, let's give this a go, and got it out on the Libby app on my e-reader, so read it as an ebook. I think when I was writing notes on this and when I wrote my Instagram review, like, the term that just kept coming up was what the fuck, because this whole book for me was just a what the fuck. So it's a really complex, and like, even now I don't feel like I've got a full handle on what was happening in terms of plot, so let me try and explain it to you. So this is, I guess, an everyman story. So it starts in, I think it might be Turkey, because I haven't got the book here to look, in very early sort of like 50 AD, and you're following one man and his he's talking about his family, and his brothers run away, and his mum and dad really want him to get married, and his sister is looking to also get married, and you're given their names, and etc, etc, sort of sets the scene. Then that's the end of that chapter, and you move on to the next chapter, which maybe is set in Israel 200 years later, and it sort of picks up from where it left off. So by now the brother's done a runner, the sister's working at the king's house, and etc, etc. His cousins come to stay, and everyone's names are slightly different based on the time that it's set and where they are. So like, for instance, someone called Juan in Mexico in the next chapter might be called John in Ireland. So yeah, it shifts along like sort of a few hundred years every time. So, and in every of these, so the nameless narrator who you never hear about, my god, this is so confusing, but honestly this is what it's like. You never hear about the name of this narrator, but he's always got like a creative job. So he's either like a script writer, like a makes shoes, makes religious sort of drawings, like always got a always got a creative thing. And then the sort of thread that runs throughout is that he's got this cousin who you don't ever really hear what's his disability is, but you're told he's got twisted legs. He's got this cousin, his sister was sexually assaulted by her first husband, so he killed him and his sister colluded together to kill the first husband. Then the sister moves on and gets another husband. The brother's done a runner, he gets a wife, all these things are happening, and they're carried on through each of the threads. Now, it's super confusing, and I actually had to look up, after like the first 5 chapters, I was like, what is going on here? Had to look up reviews to work out what was going on. So first of all, if you're reading a book that you're not really sure what's going on, and you have to look up what's going on, that's already not good. So I'd gone in, imagine like going to a book that you've absolutely loved, thinking, well, this is going to be 5 stars, and then that happening, and a star dropping off, and then something else happening. So it was just bizarre, and you come all the way up, so you work your way a whole way through history, telling this sort of like every man story. This could happen to like regardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, blah 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 blah. This story can happen to any people throughout history. Then it gets to like more recent history, and the last 2 chapters, the penultimate chapter is about a man whose family have become Trump supporters. The chapter before that also had a sort of bit of a breaking the fourth wall situation, whereby the author, who, and I haven't read this book, the author wrote a book called My Brother's Name is Jessica, which is about trans people, having not had any experience with trans people, etc. So within that chapter, so this is like the chapter before the penultimate chapter, he sort of addresses, like says, oh well, I think you should be able to write about whatever you want to write about, regardless of whether or not you've got a thing in that. And I just thought, oh, it's just like a cheap shot. Then it's about Trump supporters, and it just like the message of like John Boyne believing that all Trump supporters are thick as shit and fucking stupid is so laid on thick. You're a bit like, all right, John, we get it now, all right. And then the last chapter is like a sci-fi chapter set on a planet away, talking about how nobody has a gender, and this race of people now, you either have people who can carry the young or not carry the young, but then goes on to talk about his son and his daughter and so like defeating the object. Now the whole thing was just bonkers, but on top of that it was disablist, and the disabled character within it, who's obviously, I can't give you his name because his name changes all the time, but the narrator's cousin, as I said, you never find out what his disability is, only that you're told he's got twisted legs, but he wants to get revenge, or yeah, just wants to get, let's say wants to get revenge, so it's a revenge story I guess, on the narrator, purely because the narrator is able-bodied. And that just feels so yuck and lazy, and in all honesty a bit pathetic that John Boyne has thought, oh yeah, that's a really really good storyline, that because someone's able-bodied and their cousin's disabled, they would want revenge on that person purely because of that. So yeah, I gave it 1 star. The more I think about it, the angrier it makes me, and I was just so disappointed. But what I will say is that I can't believe I read the whole thing. It's not a short book, but I've worked my way through this whole thing, and I kept saying to David the whole way through, and I remember finishing it, and I finished it at like midnight one night, and I said to David, I can't sleep for thinking about this book, because it's just mad. Now let me know if you've read this book. Let me know what your thoughts are on this book, because I just still can't get my head around it and still feel angry about it. So those are my thoughts, and it was 1 star. So the 4th book that I read was Run Rebel by Manjeet Mann. Here it is, and I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. This is a YA book told in verse, which is a way that I really enjoy reading novels, particularly YA, and I'm always astounded by how much feeling and plot and emotion can be put out based on literally sometimes like 4 lines on a page. Like here, pride. It doesn't make me feel good, it churns me up inside, but when that anger rises, it becomes a matter of pride. And yeah, I'm always amazed by that. So this follows Amber, who has, I'm just flipping the thing, just flipping here, who lives at home with her mother and father, and her father is physically abusive and mentally abusive to her mother and to Amber. And Amber has a release in that she likes to get running, and she's not encouraged to do that by her family. Neither her mother or her father speak English. They're living in England, and neither of them speak English. And there's just so much going on here, and it feels so raw and so real. And like I said, like, there's just so much feeling and emotion on all of these pages, as well as some really clever sort of like word play or I don't know what you'd call stylization, I guess, because there's some grey pages whereby you hear the story of her mum and the story of her sister, but there's also sort of like when she's trying to teach her mum how to speak English, like it's got some really, really clever sort of like phonics, I think that's what it is, like phonics involved, and the play around of the words on the page, and it all just come together in sort of like this honestly near perfect YA verse book. I really think it's one of the best YA verse books I've read, and I just thought it was really good. I feel like it was really, really well brought together and finished off, and also realistic, because Amber is a victim in this. As I said, her father is physically and mentally abusive to both her and her mother, but Amber is also bullying somebody at school. So like, she's not just seen as like, you're not looking at Amber thinking, oh poor Amber, she's such a victim. Like she's also doing some abuse herself, and I just felt like that was just a real clever little last point to put in, that there are consequences of the abuse, and although she's an innocent, she's not innocent herself. Like, it was just so well done and so deep for a YA book. I really, really, really enjoyed this, and I feel like it will stay with me for a really long time. But yeah, I thought it was really great, and would highly recommend. Then book 5, this is a proof copy of Romacia, a fairy tale by Radia Hafiza. This isn't out until 1st of April this year, and this is a middle grade retelling of some sort of classical fairy tales. The fairy tale of Rapunzel, Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, told from a Muslim gaze, which I really enjoyed. Now, not only is that I thought it was going to be the 3 sort of storyline, the 3 stories retold, but Romacia is like the thread that holds this all together. So Romacia appears in the Cinderella story and the Sleeping Sarah story, and it just pulls it together in a really good way. Now, as I said, this is a proof copy, and the first story has some wonderful illustrations, which I presume will also appear in the Cinderella story and the Sleeping Sarah story. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed hearing about the storylines, hearing like about the familiar stories from a different point of view, but also this is like modern, because there's no sort of toxic masculinity's been removed. There's no sort of fawning over princes and just wishing that, like in all of these stories, Rapunzel, Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, ordinarily like the prince, like they want a prince, and there's nothing like that. The ugly sister element has been removed from the Cinderella story, and I just feel like it was just really, really well done and really, really enjoyable. It also, like, I was chuckling along in parts, and I, like, as I said, I really enjoyed the Romacia sort of appearing in the other stories, and it just brought it all together really well. So yeah, I really thought this was great, and I gave it 3 stars, and I would really highly rave about this in order for people to get hold of it when it comes out in April. Thought it was really, really great. Next up was an audiobook that to be honest, I'd seen the front cover of it and thought it looked fantastic, and then had seen it sort of, it must have had a really good sort of press coverage, because I felt like I'd seen it a lot but didn't know anything about it, and that's Pine by Frances Tu. Now, I listened to the audio of this on my Libby app, and like I said, I had really high hopes for it. I'd seen it popping up all over the place, but good God, sadly, I just found the whole thing so forgettable, and I've made a promise to myself this year that if a book feels forgettable, then it does not deserve more than 2 stars. So sadly it got 2 stars. Now what I will say is I really think it was a case of style over substance here. So you're following a young girl, Lauren, and her dad Niall. Now Lauren's mother went missing when she was a child, and now in the current day another girl from their village has also gone missing. So the whole case is sort of like looking at parallels between like Christine, I think her name was, Lauren's mother, and then the young girl Anne-Marie who's gone missing now. You're sort of led up the garden path with all sort of red herrings and things like that. There's like a witchy element that I was thinking, oh, when this gets off the ground this will be good, but nothing really comes of it. And I just feel like there's so much sort of fluff and description that there's literally little to no plot here, and I just didn't do anything. Like, it just really didn't do anything for me, and I really had high hopes and really thought I was going to enjoy this. So yeah, and actually when I reviewed this, what I love about reviewing books on my Instagram stories is that I get a sort of instant reaction, and so many people got back to me and said, oh my god, I felt exactly the same about this book. So a lot of people said to me, I couldn't believe like it didn't go anywhere, like there was no, and then it all felt really, really slow, and then the last sort of, honestly, about 20 minutes of the audiobook was like, oh, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and all these sort of revelations, which, because it had been built up so slow, I really just didn't give a shit about. So yeah, as I said, I've made a promise, any book that feels forgettable will now only be getting a 2-star rating from me. And then the 7th book, which is the last book that will feature in this wrap-up, is a book called Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is a YA book, and I read this on my e-reader from the Libby app. Now, whew, this was so tragic, and I went to it thinking, I don't even know how I got hold of it. I think maybe I've been looking at new releases. I definitely haven't heard anything about this book to think, oh, go and read this. But I got it on my Libby app, and it was quite a long wait for it as well, and I thought it was a book about teenage friendship. I knew it was a YA book, and I thought this was a book about teenage friendship. You're following Claudia, and her best friend Monday has gone missing, and she's trying to sort of raise the alarm with teachers at school, her mum and dad, maybe going to Monday's house herself, just trying to find out where Monday's gone. She's told that she's with her aunt, she's told that she's with her dad, she's told that she's being homeschooled. And I thought it was going to be a sort of book about Claudia now trying to make more friends because she's only ever had Monday, and her friendship with Monday was very all-encompassing. She constantly says like she's never really done it, she's never been to a sleepover with anyone else because she's only ever done these things with Monday, etc, etc. But quite quickly you realise that something's up here. Now, trigger warnings and potential spoiler warnings, because there is things in here about child abuse and child neglect and eventual child death. And the description and the detail that went into those things, I was really surprised to read in a YA book. Now, that's not me saying it doesn't need to be talked about. It needs to be talked about. But the detail in which you read about what happened to Monday was really shocked me. And especially as I thought it was a book about female teenage friendship. But yeah, it didn't shy away from some really adult themes, and I think that's important. But yeah, it was done in a really sort of shocking way. Now, I enjoyed the book, and like I said, I think it was important and interesting to me, and the whole mystery aspect really raised questions about adults not listening to children, and like Claudia trying to sort of raise the alarm and being like told, no, don't worry about it, oh, I've spoken to this person, oh, we tried ringing that number but nobody answered, but so, and like just not taking anything any further. But what I will say is that there was a timeline that ran throughout it, which sort of went from before the before and the after, which sometimes got confusing, particularly with a revelation that happens at the end of the book. You begin questioning what actually did happen before and what happened after and what happened before the before. So yeah, that was a bit confusing, but as a whole I enjoyed the book. I would just say that this is definitely like on the border of young adult to adult, just because some of the stuff in there really shocked me, and I feel like would really shock teenagers. So yeah, I gave it 3 stars, and I would definitely like recommend it and feel like it was a very eye-opening read. But yeah, definitely straddling the sort of young adult to adult border. So those are the 7 books that I've read so far this year. I tell you what, I've been doing a little like book journal and making little notes on things. It's very helpful when you're wrapping up books, rather than just thinking, What was this about? Particularly books like Pine, which I found quite forgettable. And yeah, as you can see, I've been doing quite a lot of reading on my Libby app as well, which has been very enjoyable. So those are the books that I've read so far this month. What have you read so far this month? Have you read any of these books that I've read? Are you interested in any of the books that I've read? And I will see you all again soon for another booktube video. Goodbye!